Hey, so welcome to today's history brief. Today we're going to look at the camouflaged history of Little 500. That's right, there's military connections to the origins of Little 500, and we're going to talk about what those are. So if you know anything about the history of Little 500, you probably know that there was a guy named Howdy Wilcox who started it. And maybe you know that he's Howdy Wilcox Jr. and his dad was Howdy Wilcox Sr., who was a Indy 500 race car driver. And so that was part of the story of the idea. And you may also know that Howdy got the idea from watching students race bikes around a residence hall. And that's generally what most people know about Little 500, Howdy Wilcox, and all the story and this history. And that's great. If you know that and that's all you know, that's fine. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into that, to some things that you might not have known about the origin story. So let's talk about Howdy for a second. So Howdy was born in 1920 here in Indiana, and then he came to IU and got his degree, and he worked for a couple years, and then World War II happened, and he joined the Army for World War II, and he was a captain by the time his unit, the 63rd Infantry Division, got to Europe. And 63rd was part of a group that broke the Siegfried Line and were part of the blood and fire path into Germany that fought its way in for the final defeat of the Germans. And as they were getting ready to break through the Siegfried Line, a unit near Howdy's command was overrun, or the outpost was getting shot, getting overrun, and Howdy crawled out to the outpost and for 2 hours under continuous fire exposed himself, going from troops to troop, from unit to unit, hole to hole at this outpost, rallying the troops, supporting them, encouraging them, and keeping the outpost from being overrun. He was later awarded the Silver Star for this, and then also later promoted to major. So he came out of World War II as a major and left the Army, but then quickly joined the Indiana Army National Guard, where he was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and he would spend the rest of his military career in the Indiana Army National Guard, mostly with the 38th Infantry Division. And he would retire as the Major General, Commanding General of the 38th Infantry Division in 1964. So now let's talk about that residence hall that he saw students racing around, right? So he says it was Hickory Hall. And so Hickory Hall is not the Hickory Hall that we know of today. Hickory Hall was part of something that was originally known as the Trees Complex and later known as the Smithwood Center. And all the buildings were named after trees. It was built in Smith's Woods. And as you can see, if you look at this, you can tell it was built during the war, and this is very much a barracks plan, very similar to what you would have seen on military bases in the 80s and 90s as being torn down as the old barracks. On a lot of bases. And so very familiar sort of structure and design for many folks that are familiar with that era of barracks. And Smithwood, as you can see in this 1950 map, was located on this far back corner back here. That's about where the School of Ed is today. Reed Residence Center, Sycamore, that whole little corner right there. And trees really started, the Tree Center, Smithwood really started an interesting naming tradition at the university. So Forest Residence Center is named Forest because it was built on the edge of where the trees were. Sycamore Hall, which is built on that area, got that name because of the trees. All the buildings in Union Street Center today are named after trees because of this tradition. And Reed Residence Center was originally named Smithwood because it was built in the same Smithwood area, Smithwood complex. So there's a lot of history that kind of comes out of this area during that time. So the next question becomes, who were the students? Who were the people he saw that were doing this? Well, one of the interesting things about Smithwood is, along with Rogers, which was another military World War II era residence hall complex, they were some of the first co-ed buildings on campus because they had multiple buildings. So they were co-ed centers because they had multiple buildings. But what we know about Smithwood is that there was a number of men and women who lived in Smithwood. Hickory Hall was a male hall, and so that sort of makes some sense. And many of the men who lived there were veterans, but not all of them. So it's not clear. He doesn't say who the folks are that he saw riding the bikes around, but it's possible that some of the folks that were involved with that were veterans during that time. And lastly, I would love to know how many of those first year Little 500 riders in 1951, the first year of the Little Five, how many of them were veterans. I haven't had a chance to track down all of them yet, and it's not always something that's really easy to track down, pretty time consuming. But I do know the winning team, the South Hall Buccaneers, who are featured here or pictured here, out of that group, I've only been able to track down that one had any connection to military service, and that was John Scomp, and he actually didn't serve in the military until after graduation, when he served in the Navy during the Korean War era. But that gives you an idea. If you think about how many veterans were on campus during that time, it's a pretty good chance that even some of that first year there were veterans that were competing in the Little 500 race. So that's your IU history briefing for today. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to put the button on here for that, and I'm going to put one of our previous videos up here as well. We now have over 30 videos that we have posted as part of this bicentennial project. We also have over 2,000 views of those 30 videos. So feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any of them. Go back and watch the other ones while you're in your quarantine and you got nothing else to do, or send suggestions. You got suggestions, shoot me an email, give us a phone call at the center. We're glad to dig into a little bit of history for you and share with you what it is that we know. So thank you. Keep watching.